All right, I'll call this special regional council meeting to order. Please be advised that today's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. I'm going to ask for an amendment to the agenda. Did we move the economic impacts of COVID testing and availability results up the agenda to come in after Rec Center events, Spookorama Remembrance Day report? Can I get a motion, please, to accept the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Gerwing. All those in favor? Carried. Business arising, COVID update, circuit breaker orders effective November 14th, 2021. Ms. McIver, did you want to speak to that? Mrs. Laval.
Thank you, Mayor. So we just wanted to provide just a bit of a summary and an update on the circuit breaker orders that were published by Northern Health on October 14th. There's not a ton of difference between those particular orders and what we were currently under in terms of restrictions. One of the areas that is going to impact us, though, is with our Northern Rockies events that we are currently sponsoring that are coming up within the 4-week period that the current circuit breaker is in effect for, because they have changed the restrictions for an indoor event. So we have 2 that are scheduled in this time period. One is Spookorama. The other is a potential Remembrance Day event, so which is on November 14th or November 11th, sorry. The events, while they are similar, they are slightly different. So under the orders, we would look at Spookorama as what they title a flow-through event. It's not an event where all participants come at once and are seated together, experience the event, and then all leave at once. So Spookorama is what they call a flow-through, where there are, over a longer time period, lots of people circulating through. So with the current restrictions in place, we would be conducting any Spookorama events much like we did last year. So we would have 2-hour windows, and according to the restrictions, every 2 hours we must sanitize and clean vendor spaces, so i.e. the booths that the children are interacting in, so the games, and any common spaces. So if there are tables or chairs or places where people would have a common space, so bathrooms and things like those would need to be sanitized. So similar to our last year, we would have sort of breaks throughout the day that we would either close or sanitize while people are in the space. And I'll let Stacy update some specifics. But one of the things is this will be probably one of the first public events where we do have to ask for vaccine passports. So our staff under the order will have to ask for proof of vaccine. We have been advertising that on the bottom of our posters that proof of vaccine will need to be shown. So we will, this will be one of the first more public areas that we would have to ask for that. The next event is Remembrance Day. So this is more of a typical event where you have people coming and sitting for the entire event and then leaving together. So under the current orders, we would be restricted to 50 people. So the fire department is speaking with the other emergency services to see if they, what preference they would have for any type of event. So when we know more, we will let council know, but we might be going to a more virtual type of event where we record and broadcast. So we just wanted to provide that bit of an update. Stacy, did you have anything to add?
Sorry. No, I think that kind of covers it for those 2. The capacity issue with the flow through event is not necessarily impacting the Spookorama. It's a 50% capacity, so there still is a limit on how many people that can go through. We just have to also, as we're letting people through, keeping a tally on how many people are in a space at a given time and trying to keep that flow going, so we don't end up with backups of flow. And I do believe the craft fair would be the same thing. However, it falls outside the window, but probably not with enough notice that since it's the 19th, I believe it ends, the craft fair is the 20th, 21st. we we don't get a lot of notice with these things to make any big changes. So we'll be probably operating under the same set of rules for the spookorama as we would for the craft fair.
So when the children attend Spookorama, do we do an intake of 50 people and then stop any more people from coming in? How
We're
is
not-
that accomplished?
We're not limited because it's a flow through. So
Okay,
our limit would be 50% of the capacity of the community hall at any one time.
the whole community hall.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And that's being monitored?
yeah, it's kind of like a it's a capacity, but it's a flowing capacity. So
Okay.
you, as long as people are continuously going out, then
Right.
you can let a few more in, and a few more people come out, you can let a few more in.
And how do we make sure that the people that are coming in and the people that are going out are being accounted for so we know what the capacity is? Or are we so far under that limit that we don't have to worry about that? Stacy?
Generally for our spookoramas, we'd had door trackers even prior to COVID. We kind of had people tallying plus our patron counters on our doors as well. So those are the two ways we'd be keeping an eye on that. I think we'll just have to very closely monitor the community hall itself, which is about 200, which gives us a lot of room. And then that upstairs hallway going into the haunted house, which is again one of our other bottlenecks. So those will be key places that will have people with the checkers.
Very well. Any questions for Ms. Aspen or Ms. Laval? Councillor Goring.
So for Remembrance Day, then we are going to have some sort of event. It could be a hybrid of in-person and virtual or one or the other, but I just want to confirm that we are going to have something.
I don't know 100% if we are going to have something, because I don't know if all of the emergency services are willing to participate. We're just in that process now of contacting the RCMP, BC Ambulance, Rangers, just to confirm that their willingness to participate in something. Because it is led by our fire department, but their participation is voluntary.
Okay.
Any other questions on the rec center? Very well. Did you want to address the impact of the federal vaccine mandate at Northern Rockies Regional Airport?
I can. This one's fairly brief as well. So when that initial mandate was announced by the federal government, we were unsure as to how that would impact our airport operations. Through some consultation processes, we are led to believe that we will perhaps be exempt from that mandate, given our small size and the fact that we have no security. So we, at this point, are anticipating not being required to put in a vaccine mandate for our employees. We are unsure as to how the air operators are going to be putting in their vaccine mandates. So for instance, Central Mountain Air does come in here on a regular basis. When they fly into other airports, whether it's Prince George or Port St. John or Vancouver, they will be required to do the air passenger vaccine checks. So we don't know if they're going to just not do that here locally. And we're not sure how that is going to interplay yet, but right now we know our staff will most likely not be required to have the vaccine mandate.
Any other questions about the airport? Very well. Thank you. Moving on to economic impacts of COVID-19 testing and availability of results. Councillor Gerwing.
Yeah, so I just was wondering if council was in favor of sending a letter to Northern Health and the Ministry of Health outlining what we perceive to be a lengthy delay in receiving our COVID-19 test results. Yeah, that's what I would like us to do.
Do you have any comments, councillors? Councillor Penny.
I know with my business, I've been impacted several times where I've had employees away from work for up to a week before they've gotten the results back. So it has been very troublesome. I've been very fortunate that it hasn't been, say, one of my, I don't want to think more important or less important of employees, but I haven't had my techs affected by it, but I have had apprentices affected by it. And I tell you, if it would have been one of my techs, it really would have put a cramp in our business. So I can understand how other businesses are being affected. So I'd be in favor.
Of the only two people that I know of that have had COVID tests lately, both of them have had their test results returned within 4 days. I think the mandate is 1 to 3 days, and I know you've had an experience where it's been 7 days, and I think Councillor Gerwin's alluded to longer test times than the 4 days as well. I don't know how widespread this is. I had some thoughts on this, and I'm not exactly sure how I come down on this. If an employee gets ill and goes home, they don't automatically get a COVID test. They have to show symptoms and they have to contact the health authority. And then I guess they're assessed. And if the symptoms are such that it could be COVID, a test is permitted. And then once that COVID test is given, the test is sent away. And this is the problem where it's been 3 to 7 days before this test gets back. And so what we're saying is if it's been 3 days and the employee is feeling better, he can't go back to work because he doesn't have his COVID test back. I guess sometimes what I think is if an employee is away and they're feeling ill, they should be staying away for, up to 4 days so that they don't infect anybody, even if it's not COVID. And I don't know how widespread the delay is here in COVID testing. You're saying 7 days, and Councillor Gurman, you've got an example of 7 days. So, Councillor Penny?
Well, when I say a week, I'm referring to a business week. And if let's go with the 4-day window. If Monday they're tested, we're talking that week is gone because you have 4 days for it to come back, because we know that it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to be in anybody's hands to get the test started even until Tuesday. So that leaves it till Friday until we would get it. So there's a full work week that's gone. I mean, the thing is that if there are these rapid tests available, why is it upon either the employee or the employer to spend $175 to get this rapid test? I mean, it's just, all employers are so taxed already in this community trying to survive. The businesses are just trying to keep going, and for them, if they had extra employees that they could bring in to replace these ones that are waiting for the test, it probably wouldn't even be that big a deal, but they don't. We barely have enough employees to keep our businesses going. So the reason why I would be in favor of sending this letter is at least get some sort of answer. Why can't these rapid tests be used here in the community? Why can't our health unit or our hospital be able to issue these instead of us having to pay outside sources $175 to have it happen? That was my.
Councillor Gurwin?
I just wanted to pick up on something that you said, Mayor, that if somebody's sick, no matter whether it's COVID or not, they should be at home. Absolutely. Like, that's not the argument in my head. What happened, or what brought it to light for me, it was a not-for-profit. They had an exposure.
Okay.
And so you call the number, you're contacted via the person that ended up tested positive. So the positive test didn't come from inside the agency.
Right.
It was a client. So then the exposure is determined to be that employee has to be sent home until a COVID test comes back as
Okay.
negative. The employee had no symptoms at all. There has been all safety
Right.
measures have been in place at that agency. So the employee goes home and fully understands, through no fault of anybody, is now at home for 4, 7, 10 days, depends. And how can, whether it's a business or a not-for-profit or a local government, continue to pay that? Because these exposures are going to continue throughout our community. So
So this is in the case of an employee who's not really showing any symptoms, but has been exposed to a COVID test or a
a COVID positive client.
client. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to reiterate, the employees that I had the issue with were the same way. They just had exposure. And
So
like
they
I said,
weren't
I wouldn't
ill.
be asking anybody to come
Okay.
back to my business if they were sick. These were
Right.
employees that had been contacted through Northern Health that they had been exposed. So,
Okay. Ms. McIver, did you contacted someone in the health authority to find out length of time, or if there was
We haven't had a response back yet.
haven't had a response back yet?
So
Very well.
under so under the guidelines, yeah,
Yeah.
under the current guidelines for exposures, if you go onto the Northern Health page, they have a document that talks about exposures and what you're supposed to do. So there is some guidelines that state if you're asymptomatic, i.e. you're not showing symptoms, and you have been vaccinated, you do not have to self-isolate. You just have to monitor for symptoms, according to Northern Health. That is their guidance that they have on their page. So for instance, very close member of my family was referred for a COVID test on Thursday. The guidance to me was not that I had to self-isolate. I was obviously a close contact. I had to monitor for symptoms because I'm fully vaccinated. If you are not fully vaccinated, they may provide you different guidance. But because if you are, then you just have to monitor for symptoms. You do not have to self-isolate, even as a close contact of a person who's potentially positive.
Huh.
All that said, though,
I know,
if you get the call that says
You're
this
supposed to.
person has to self-isolate, then as an employer, you have to follow that. So, we could debate that as well, because you're absolutely right. It depends on who you get as to what advice you get sometimes. But I mean, we could go on forever, but at the end of the day, why is 4 to 7 to 10 days the acceptable length of time to get a COVID test result? I could argue that it's not like that everywhere.
No.
So
The
why is
other-
it like that
yeah.
here?
The options for the businesses, the local businesses, that if it's a workplace exposure, then that particular self-isolation period, that employee's loss of wages would become a work-safe claim as well. So they could claim for that lost wages. So the employee would not be out wages. That does not help the business who is now out unemployed.
Because, and as we all know, with every claim you get, your rate
Yes.
goes up. So
Yeah.
it isn't, employers or agencies are not going that route because they can't afford those increases in
Well,
premiums.
I guess I'm a little confused. Not familiar with this, but I mean, if it was a work-safe claim for COVID, this is no fault of the employers, obviously. How does WorkSafe penalize the employer for a claim for that? Councillor Penny.
if there is any claim, there has never been a case with my business that it's been the business's fault of any accident. But it's an accident that's occurred during business hours to an employee. And if they make a claim through WCB, whatever that amount is, I don't know what the mechanism is that they work it out, but my percentage of WCB premiums go up.
Well,
So whatever they deem that risk, I don't know what the risk matrix is, or you do? Okay.
So WorkSafe BC, when they apply premiums to businesses, it's a two-part mechanism. They will take a look at Councillor Penny's business, which is an automotive repair. You will get a initial, so your WCB premiums are based on your payroll. You'll get an initial assessment based on the type of business you have, and then you will get an individual business adjustment based on your individual business's experience rating. And your experience rating is directly driven from your claims. So as the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality, we're given a local government initial rate, and then WorkSafe looks at our claims rating over the last 3 to 5 years, and you are given an individual adjustment based on your individual experience. So you have a starting wage, but then you are rate, and then you are penalized or claims if you are worse than every other automotive repair industry. Or
and
better
then I
than.
believe it goes down the other way as well.
Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead. But that's your initial one.
Yeah, but you
But
totally,
But
your
then
own.
if there's any claim
yes.
along the way, it
Yep.
changes, right? I've
Yep.
been paying for a claim that happened before I purchased Then I thought, so.
Councillor Gerwin.
So this is all really great information, but and help me to understand what council, if council is hesitant towards sending a letter asking why we have a 4 to 7 to 10 day window for return of COVID tests. Like, I don't find that acceptable, but what about the rest of council? Like if the rest of council doesn't find 4 to 7 to 10 to however many day response, if we don't find that acceptable, then can we not write a letter? And if it's only me and everybody else is okay, then I'm okay with not writing a letter, I guess.
Councillor Roper, you haven't said much, so would you like to chime in?
Yeah, it seems to me that in other parts of Northern Health, the wait is maybe 2 to 3 days. So, it might help for us to get a better understanding as to why it's taking, sometimes twice as much, sometimes more to get results. My son just got a COVID test and he's on day 6 now and still no results.
Yeah.
He's pretty much better now from the symptoms he had. So the results really don't matter at this point. So I'd like to have an understanding. And if we are going to write a letter, I support writing the letter. I think if there's any opportunities for us to advocate in any way, a letter is the simplest way to do it. Maybe we should also incorporate these rapid tests, because that would be very helpful for our businesses. If, we have asymptomatic people that were maybe given an exposure notice, to get that test result in 10 or 15 minutes would save a business potentially thousands of dollars in lost revenue. So I'm absolutely in favor of writing the letter. That was never a question for me.
Okay, so maybe we can go this way, is write a letter to Northern Health stating that we've heard that there are delays in the testing, and Northern Health, I believe on their website says 1 to 3 days. And we found that there are numerous people in our community who have had longer wait times than that, and asking if there's a possibility that we could do rapid testing in Fort Nelson if there is some kind of logistical delay in getting these results back. Would that be Councillor Gerwin?
Sure, but I would like it to the Ministry of Health, the CC, and to Dan Davies, CC as well. So
Okay.
that- to keep them informed.
Do you have a seconder then? Councillor Gerwin, Councillor Roper. Very well. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Oh, do we need to assign a timeline, or is that would be as soon as possible, or?
We'll get something else as soon as we can here.
Okay.
Draft something and circulate it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Very well. I guess I'm going to ask for temporary adjournment. Then we don't have the delegation before us till 1 o'clock this afternoon. So I'll ask for a motion to temporarily adjourn the special regional council meeting. Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried, and we are temporarily adjourned.
We're back at 1 p.m., Mr. Mayor.
Ms. McIver?
Yeah, we'll be back at 1 p.m. with the delegates. I was just noting we can't adjourn the stream. So I'll just mute the audio, and if council wants to have some lunch in the meantime.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm going to step out. I'm going to leave this streaming on my computer, but I'll be back.
Very well. Thank you. Very well, I'll call the special regional council meeting back to order again. Today we have the Ministry of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources Operation, Rural Development, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister Mike Hikeaway, and Associate Deputy Minister Eamon O'Donoghue with us. So gentlemen, I will ask you to go ahead and give us your presentation.
Okay, well, I'll turn this on and we don't have, any kind of formal presentation. We thought we'd come and talk about a couple of the issues that are, we hope, on the front of mind to you guys. And let us know, like, if there's other things you want to talk about, you can just let us know and we'll raise them for sure. So a couple things that we thought we would just chat a little bit is about the peak energy proposal. I'm sure you guys have an interest in that. Maybe thought we would cover a little bit of the Blueberry River First Nation decision and what that might mean for the province. And maybe a little bit just then about potential organizational changes inside the ministry. Is there anything else you'd like us to cover?
I believe Councillor Soules wanted to talk about the agricultural aspect of forestry, so he can bring that up at perhaps after we discuss the others, if that's okay, Councillor?
I think it's actually definitely a backseat to the other things that we want to talk
Yes.
about.
Okay.
So peak energy. So you guys probably know this project fairly well, I'm presuming. I know there's been initiatives before that. I think last time I was here, we were talking about the Stern group and the potential project there. And as you guys probably know, we're very keen to see something happen up here. There's lots of bad news in many other parts of the province with declining timber supplies and as a result of either mountain pine beetle or spruce beetle or other issues. And so, this is the one part of the province where we have a very robust timber supply. And what we need is a good proponent up in here to take advantage of that and translate that into some kind of benefits to the community and to the province, to be honest. So as you guys are probably well aware, the minister approved the Bill 22 decision to the transfer of the tenure from Canfor over to Peak. So that was a pretty big milestone that we got to. I know that tenure has been in Canfor's hands for many years and hasn't been active. And so it's now moved over to this proponent. So they have a portion of the volume that they'll need to run that plant, a pretty significant, chunk of it. We're in active discussions with Peak on the remaining of their tenure requirements. Mike and I met with them here last week, and we had a very, I think, positive, successful meeting about where the source of their tenure is going to come from, the rest of the volume. There's obviously the community forest, but you guys have a chunk of volume, 185,000 cubic meters there that we presume would be part of that realm of volume that would be available to them. The rest of the volume, we've got elements of it all in place. We think at the end of the call, they were satisfied that we're able to meet their tenure requirements, a portion of which could be part of BCTS, a volume that's up here because it's not active right now. The key thing for us, and we're very transparent with Peak about this, is making sure that we make enough commitment for them around the volume where they can take that to the bank, but also where we don't commit it unless we know they're committed. So until they demonstrate, absolutely that they are going to build or in the building process with a final investment decision, that, that's when the tenure would actually get handed over. In the interim, we can make agreements through letters to them to say our intention is if you meet these conditions, then that tenure can transfer over.
So, Mr. O'Donoghue, this is very good news for us. And we, although we aren't party to some of these discussions between forestry and Peak Renewables, we have a huge vested interest in this for our community. And as you know, our community's been devastated over the past decade with the loss of the forest industry. And at one time we had plywood, we had 2x4s, we had OSB, we had chopsticks, we had a variety of things that provided good primary jobs to our community, and those are all gone. We had Stern Group, as you had mentioned, that had come, and we had great hopes that they would, come here and build an OSB plant, and that didn't come to fruition. I'm a little bit hesitant, of course, of, sending up the balloons here on Peak Renewables until we have some firm commitments. And I'm glad to hear that, you're looking to Peak to get those commitments, because a lot of people in our community naturally are concerned about logs leaving our community for manufacture elsewhere. We want those jobs in here, in our community, as much as possible. Peak Renewables has been very open with us, saying that, you know, the deal with their tenure that they got from Canfor involves sending some conifer south. And I think our community is reasonable in looking at that and saying this is a reasonable trade, that we can get this manufacturing here and some conifer will have to go south. But we don't want to get into the situation where we have a pellet plant and all the valuable conifer is going south to a mill. That's not what we're looking for. We want to see as much manufacturing in our community as possible. And we've had various discussions around the table here, and I think everyone in this room is about at the same place with that. So I'm encouraged that that you've reached out to Peak Renewables and you're coming to a deal. The other very important aspect of this is the rail line, and it's not really the focus of forestry, but it is a very big concern for us. Without utilizing that rail line is going to disappear. And I think this is our one chance to have valuable manufacturing go on in the Northern Rockies, utilize that rail line for CN's benefit, or perhaps for a short line operator's benefit, depending on how things go. But it's absolutely crucial that we get this forestry up and running here in our community before that rail line disappears, because if that disappears, you know yourself that the idea of shipping wood out of Northern Rockies is going to become very, very expensive and very cost prohibitive. So we are in a hurry, but we want to move ahead much the same as you've outlined, that, you know, these tenures are going to be sufficient for Peak Renewables. And there's going to be some guardrails around that, if you like. I think this project has got everything that we need here. It's got First Nations involvement. It's got the community's backing largely. It's got a committed proponent that wants to come here and develop something. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for our community. We really want to make sure this is not lost.
I will say, it's Mike, even though the rail line is not our purview specifically as Ministry of Forest, I am involved in a meeting later this week. It's Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Jobs and Economic Recovery, our ministry, and Peak again to talk about that. So trying to pull all the pieces together in a timely way, but needing to do it well and properly, not just agreeing to one aspect without looking at the other components.
There are a lot of moving pieces in this, and it's very important that the government is on board across several ministries. And we've mentioned this to Minister of Municipal Affairs and your Minister, Ms. Conroy, about, you know, the need to have these ministries involved. And I've spoken to Minister Fleming about this as well, about the importance of the railway and what happens if it disappears. And we certainly don't want to see this rail line leave the community or get abandoned.
Absolutely, and we're concerned about that as well. Peaks remain very optimistic to us that they have some viable options, which is good. It's recently talked about, they feel confident about some federal dollars as well. So I remain hopeful that works out, because we know the risk of losing. So yeah, very optimistic on Peak. Maybe I'll just shift on to the next topic here. So I didn't mention this off the top, but maybe I will just talk about it briefly. Is old growth. You probably heard a lot in the media just around old growth provincially. Lots of discussion around it. Province has committed, Premier's committed to implement the old growth report. So there's been a science panel set up. They've come out with a map of demonstrating where the priority at-risk old growth is around the province. And there's going to be some work ongoing with First Nations in the next couple of weeks. And then I think somewhere, we hope in the first week of November, there'll be more of a broad public announcement around old growth. Certainly, I know, and I think this is very valuable here. We met with Fort Nelson, and even before seeing a map or anything, they said, well, we're not really interested in what some groups from down south are doing around old growth, and we'll be sending a letter to that effect. And that's a pretty powerful statement coming from them. The province will very much respect that. So my sense is it probably won't be an issue. I thought you'll see that public announcement and start to let you know how that will go. I don't know how much you've heard about organizational change. It's more of an internal thing than probably something you're very interested in. But the Premier announced after the last election, he wanted to see a review of the Ministry of Forests and Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, which are full title right now, to see, he, I think, was expressing interest in seeing a standalone Ministry of Forest. And usually government, when they do these things, they decide on that day, and we find out, we see the list of deputy ministers, and we start scrambling to, align to that. This was quite unique, and the Premier gave deputies a chance to look at the organization. And my sense is that in December or January, we'll see hopefully a decision about, what the new organizational structure could look like. But my sense is, I think they're thinking that Flanroe right now, it's hard to manage the breadth of the work there under one minister and under one deputy minister. So we might see something new come out of that. It is the decision exclusively of the Premier, so we'll never know what he'll decide at the end of the day. But hopefully it doesn't mean much of a difference in service from us to you guys, that we'll be here and present on all these issues.
From our point of view in Fort Nelson, where we have so many moving pieces here that go across ministries, to create a different ministry, Minister of Forest, Minister of Rural Development, is yet one more ministry that has to interface with the other one. And I mean, I don't know what issues there are within forestry, but I know that sometimes things don't work well between ministries. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. And I hope it's a smoother operation than what we've had in the past. And that would be our hope. But
yeah. I know the last word I'll just say on that is there is no perfect organizational model. There'll always be pros and cons to everyone. I do think right now, with the changes over the last decade in terms of the complexity of land management out there, particularly on our reconciliation path that we're on, I think this change might be helpful.
speaking of reconciliation, I wanted to point out that the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality and Fort Nelson First Nations are in lockstep here with this proposal of peak renewables. And we have very good relations with Fort Nelson First Nations Chief Gale. And going forward, I think this peak renewables proposal is an excellent step towards reconciliation in Northern British Columbia. So it is that box that is important to get ticked.
Let's maybe stop and make a comment on that. We met with Chief Gale and her councillors here just before lunch, and quite independently said almost exactly the same thing, Your Worship, that she said, which is, it's not normal, right? This is quite an achievement that you guys have such a constructive and positive relationship. She said exactly the same thing. We have a great relationship ourselves in local government. We're very much on the same page around peak renewables, and that's a remarkable achievement. So really hats off to the work you've done around that, because that can make a huge difference in I think the viability of these kind of projects coming in. Maybe I'll just finish just on Blueberry River First Nation. So I think you guys have all obviously seen the court decision around Blueberry River. It was pretty clear. I've never in my career seen as stark a decision in terms of its directness and bluntness to the province on that. That we have. Oh, sorry. Hi, Mike. By the way, I didn't know if I said hello to you earlier. Just seeing you around there, and John Roper, and I will. Carrie Lynn's on too. So hi all. I hadn't turned this way. So the decision was pretty clear that we've infringed on treaty and Blueberry River's treaty rights, and that we were dishonorable in our dealings with them. Those are pretty harsh words for the province. So we're into the negotiation now with Blueberry. You heard of the interim announcement or interim agreement we have, which is really just a very preliminary starting point. Some significant restoration dollars as part of that agreement. provided to Blueberry. But it's going to mean a change in resource management, not just in Blueberry Rivers community as well, but around the province. I've seen just in the last week 3 or 4 letters from different nations who are referencing the Blueberry decision. It's a massive decision. My guess is it's going to be anywhere from a 25 to 30% decrease in the kind of traditional economic activity that we have on the land base to address that particular interest in that area. So it's, and I'm guessing at that, we don't know what's going to come out at the end of it. We don't know what Blueberry's economic interests really are deeply yet. We're just at the front end of sort of examining those. We're getting some ideas on the table, but it is a significant change for us up there. So again, I think your relationship with Fort Nelson is just First Nations, just especially important to be working with them. And so that's where we're at. We're really at the front end of the negotiation, but we're hoping to move very quickly on it. I don't know, Mike. You want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add though, we are dealing specifically with Blueberry River Chief and Council in the negotiations of what the next stages of, and the judge gave us a 6-month period to work out more detailed processes and how we're going to assess the cumulative effects and cumulative impacts of development on their claim area. But we're keeping in mind, and we're starting to reach out with our ministry colleagues from Indigenous Relations as well, to contact all the Treaty 8 chiefs, because it's about the whole Treaty 8 area, and as Eamon said, across the whole province. So whatever we're developing as far as those kind of values and assessment methodologies we look at when we're making land planning decisions, it needs to be appropriate and scalable across the whole province as well.
I think we're in a very good place with Fort Nelson First Nations, and sometimes I go to places and I just came back from Fort St. John where there was a meeting of mayors and chiefs, and they had a facilitator there, and I was mentioning to Chief Gale, this is like marriage counseling when there's nothing wrong with your marriage, and you're sort of getting hauled in there to, and we're sort of looking at each other like, we're glad to help, but we're not the ones who need the help. But anyway, yes, our relationship with Fort Nelson First Nations is very good, and I think going forward, there's going to be a lot more engagement with First Nations on what goes on out in the oil patch and so on and so forth. And I think that's nothing but good. I think, it's high time this happened, and it's not going to be easy for the government to navigate that. And there's going to be impacts on business and government and people and First Nations and everything else. It's going to be something to try to navigate. People of goodwill who sit down around a table get a lot of things done. So hopefully that's what you'll be looking at in your ministry, is people of goodwill who want to improve things. So.
And maybe I will add, because you made a really good point there, is that the Oil and Gas Commission is also there, Ministry of Energy and Mines is there. Again, we can't do this independently as a forest sector. It has to be all the activities. I have seen some promising signs there as well.
Good. Any other questions for these gentlemen on things that they've discussed before we get to Councillor Sol's issue?
Just one, and that was regarding, historically, we had what we call the undercut, and of course, undercut just accumulates and a lot of undercut accumulates in 14 years based on the old AAC. And so we had a roughly 20 million cubic meters of wood that's sitting in a pot, was sitting in a pot. Is that pot being moved into into the general account so that it's part of the discussions for broader tenure for peak and so on?
It's a great question. So when the 2019 TSR took place, when the chief forester established a new annual allowable cut, she wrote off all the previous undercut. So that's not available for any new cut. But since that decision already, there's been a significant amount of undercut that's accumulated again. So it would be part of the tenure solution for peak, is the utilization of that undercut. So we anticipate we could even give them up to a 20-year tenure for $500,000 a year, just utilizing the undercut since the TSR. Yeah.
So that's definitely on the table.
Good. No, and I think that actually gives you a creative way to make something good out of something that has kind of been a pain for us all.
Yeah.
And it's actually a creative way. Thanks.
So, Mr. O'Donoghue, do you have any timeline here or any sense of the timeline before we can get, I mean, I keep hearing positive things about the project, but we are still yet to have a final investment decision, or what I would call a final investment decision. Do we have any sense here of where we are in this whole process? How far along do we have to go here?
Yeah, it's interesting. From the tenure perspective, like our support in terms of tenure, I think we're close to having things sorted and settled on that front of it. And I think I gave Peak some pretty good assurances last week around, the last little missing piece of their tenure puzzle, which would involve them having access to a certain portion of the BCTS volume. Because to be honest, without them up here, we're not selling a lot of BCTS volume. So we would like them to purchase some of that BCTS volume on the market, even though they'd probably be the only client.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a positive discussion about that last week, and we think we've got a resolution essentially there now. Whether or not there's other significant issues, and I think the rail line is probably the biggest significant issue for Peak, and so the work that they're doing with the federal government, and what they're going to come back to, discussion with Mike here later this week on that front, to me is the core stumbling block. If they can crack that egg, then I think things will move relatively quickly. Brian Ford, one of the leads behind Peak here, he's quite known for doing things. He's not known for just pie in the sky kind of ideas, right? He is known for doing and building different operations around the province. So he knows his business. I've heard him talk in detail about Mackenzie, a different part of the province, but I'd never heard anybody talk with such insight as he had about the whole balance of the series of issues there. So if anybody can make it work up here, I think he'll be able to sort it out. So fingers crossed. But honestly, the rail line is a bit of a black box to me. I'm not sure how they're going to figure that one out.
I had spoken to Minister Fleming about the rail line and the importance, and also Minister Bear when she was up here, about the importance of the rail line. That's really the northeast corner of British Columbia. It's almost, that rail line runs through a quarter of British Columbia, and to see that disappear would be more than just a tragedy. And I'm hoping that they can find a solution here, whether it involves some funding from the provincial government or some funding from the federal and provincial government, or both. But I think that rail line is not just important to our community, but it's important to the entire province of British Columbia. It's a gateway to the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, where mines need access for concentrate to come out of those mines. And there's more mines being developed all the time. And I think there's a great potential for this railway and this railhead to take resources and move them from here down south. And I think first of all, I think someone can make some money on it. And I think some investment is going to be needed in that rail line. Somebody with some foresight to see what this rail line can do. As you are probably aware, WAC Bennett put rail lines throughout British Columbia to build BCR and to build the province, really. And this is another example of that, where we can't let this disappear. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Souls, did you want to talk about agriculture and trees?
Maybe I'll say I'm going to talk about agriculture again. One of the ideas that we've presented, it's too bad that this issue couldn't have actually been discussed at greater detail over the last 14 years, right, since the forest industry shut down. But given that this is about process, given the process for determining stumpage rates in the province relies on previous sales data. So for many, many years, the previous sales data came out of a relatively valuable high stumpage area that was always being used constantly to keep Fort Nelson's, to determine what Fort Nelson's agricultural, or it's not specific to agriculture, it's just Fort Nelson's stumpage rates would be. So we were locked in with a 2006 stumpage rate essentially as the data piece for measuring what our stumpage should be. So consequently, our stumpage sat at a higher rate than the market warranted for years and years and years, and just a spin-off effect from it. And you recognize, even for flying around, it's not a whole lot of us around here. I happen to be a farmer, so this is kind of dear to me, but there's not a whole lot of us that are farming here. But it actually blocked any agricultural growth. Farming didn't just make it expensive, it blocked it from happening. And so I know that we've had this discussion. I had this discussion with the current and the previous two forest ministers prior to the current one that we have. And it's just an issue that I realize it's a small thing, but we as a council were under the impression that that was actually an angle that was being worked on. And then find out last year that it wasn't. So anyway, we had discussions. We thought they were going somewhere. The agricultural growth was part of the discussions with the minister, and we thought that it was going somewhere. I don't think I'm the only one. When I say we, I'm not the only one in this room that thought that. Am I, Scott? No. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so but anyway, pardon us for being wrong, and it's kind of water under the bridge. And I think that things will get sorted out. I realize that's just that's a backwards look. Looking forward, though, that process would need to be tweaked. If we don't see something happen, we'll still be pushing this button. If we don't see peak move forward, we'll still be pushing because it's still blocking agricultural.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about this because I hope I'm not wrong, and maybe I'm missing a piece of this, but I know this has been a discussion for many years. We've talked about this and that the tabular rates that were used here for things like agricultural purposes, farmer wants to clear their land, what's the stumpage they got to pay on that land, and that they were based on a market of Fort St. John that was a long way away from here that has sawmills present. And sure, you can pay more stumpage down when you can deliver it to a sawmill and it's worth more money. And the problem was that up here, that wasn't feasible. And so I worked with our tenures folks, and we did make a change to the appraisal manual that I thought we came here and expressed, where now we discount the travel cost that would be between here and Fort St. John from that tabular stumpage rate. So that should have been reflected in a lower tabular stumpage rate for this area.
It should have, and it is a lower stumpage rate. And the variable now that was applied to that, you say it's a travel variable, and it is an additional write-off cost or write-down cost based on the extra distance from the northern part of the Fort St. John District. So yes, it does exist. So now I think it exists.
It is.
It is, except it's just that since the application of those stumpage rates, there's been no way to move wood. There's no buyers in the south willing to take wood out of this area based on that newer stumpage tabular rate.
So I'm just going to turn to my colleague here. So I just want to make sure the interior appraisal manual, those quarterly updates, we did an update. We lowered it based on that.
Yes.
On that from previous data, what the Hall, I think it's called
Hall differential, or
yeah. And what would that amount to in terms of stumpage? Do you know?
It's been when this first came out.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, sorry about that. So a 6.62 hour Hall differential. When this came into effect, stumpage in Fort St. John. So the difference was about between Fort St. John tabular rates and Fort Nelson was about $14.50. Then everything happened, lumber skyrocketed, and then stumpage caught up to that. So where Fort St. John is about $56.41 a cubic meter, Fort Nelson's at $41.10. So about a $15.30 difference between those based on that Hall differential. And that's applied to every table in the
TSA.
Yeah, so that that probably, so that was the main difference we were trying to get is that whole differential difference, and we hope that made a big difference. Which
Well, thanks for working on that because that's really awesome.
yeah, so that's great. Now, obviously, with the price of lumber having gone up so significantly, that's still a pretty high stumpage rate.
You noticed that too, eh?
We expect that to come down significantly in January.
That won't matter to us because our things are FLT, our TFLs, our OLTCs are locked in for a year. So we're locked in at the highest price.
To be locked
For
in for a
stumpage.
year. And that is something I just talked to Chris mentioned to me this morning about that notion. And that's something I do have some questions about, and we'll go ask and sort of ask our tenures and pricing folks just about the way that works. But under the current system, as I understand, you're right, Councilor, that will be locked in for a year.
Are there any other questions for the Deputy Minister? Wow, you're getting off easy today.
Well, I was just wondering, the hiring practices here at the regional district. I'm just looking around the room and seeing some of my former staff. That's saying, yeah, I know. I guess I didn't move fast enough on that stumpage issue.
What are you trying to say, Eamon?
Did anybody tell Eamon about Chris's application he's put in with him? Yeah. And Mrs. Vance, you're on the line here, and I'm just wondering when your application is going to come to the Northern Rockies.
I'm in Fort St. John, so I think I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful job opportunities up here. We're going to be getting a pellet mill. It's going to be great.
Don't put the ideas.
Very well. Any comments, Ms. Vance?
No, thank you for accommodating me. It was great to hear. And I was in Fort Nelson about a month ago, so I met with some of your members as well, which was great.
Good. So no other comments. Unless speeches, Mr. Barry. Any burning questions you'd like to ask the Deputy Minister? He doesn't come here very often, and I think we should, we should ask him all the questions we can while we've got him.
Nothing from our end to be appreciative that the agricultural, the tabular rate piece of that can be looked at, because it's something that the frequency of the adjustments for sure.
Yeah.
So that's when myself and Lisa chatted about a few weeks back. Other than that, appreciate you coming up and taking the time. It's always a pleasure. And you've taken the time to come up and pleasure meeting you. And as always, Chris, good to see you.
So, Mr. O'Donoghue, Mr. Hikeway, is there anything that the regional municipality can do to speed this peak renewables project along?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think the main thing you guys have done is in us in creating that partnership with Fort Nelson, having that positive working relationship. Like, you guys may have had it for long enough where you may not, I don't know, you may not notice how valuable that is, but that is so valuable in terms of this project. I think it gives the client certainty, it gives us certainty. It made our Bill 22 decision much, much easier. And so that's really important. And I think certainly if there's anything around the rail line, through Mike's discussions there, and we see, hey, there's a risk here, but there's maybe an opportunity for, either you to make some lobbying effort or whatever it might be, we will certainly, Mike or I will certainly be in touch about that.
We'd appreciate that, because sometimes we don't know, what role we can play, or if there's a significant role that we can play to advance the project. I think, as I said before, I think the Peak Renewables project is going to be a good fit for the Northern Rockies, and it's going to bring much needed economic development for our community. And without belaboring the point about the downturn in the economy over the past decade, this is really important to our community.
I'll just add to that, to what you both said, is that that's my message when I go to this joint ministry meeting later this week, is that we're advocating for it, we're supportive of it. It's clear how supportive you are, your partnership with the Fort Nelson First Nation. They're advocacy of it is clear, is known. And I mean, we don't want the lack of the tenure opportunity to be interpreted as a stumbling block. So we're committed to that. Eamon's given that, I've given that. And we think it's absolutely a win-win-win. And so that the rail line issue is a challenge. And it's going to be a challenge to overcome. I'll know more after the meeting. I believe it's Thursday afternoon. And then I will be able to talk to Carrie Lynn or Chris to see if there is anything that you can do. But at this point, I think you've done a lot already. So talking to the ministers, but it'll be interesting to hear the access to federal support. That's something that the peak representatives have been fairly optimistic about. So that could be an avenue that's going to be part of the solution.
Speaking to your minister, Minister Conroy, she was very open at the UBCM meetings. I mean, usually when you're speaking to a minister, they do a lot of listening. They don't do a lot of talking, and they've got staff members that sit there and say, don't say anything. God's sakes, don't make any promises. But Minister Conroy is very, very engaging, and it was much more conversational about our project and about the importance to the community. And I appreciate that she was that open and willing to discuss things, and I appreciate that very much.
We were both sitting on either side of her at that call, and you were on the phone. It was unfortunate, it was by phone, and neither of us told her not to say anything. We were hoping to see what
That's good. That's good. Councilor Gervin.
So this meeting that you're going to on Wednesday, would it be, if it's appropriate, can we get an update on any information that you maybe glean from that?
Well, I believe it's Thursday afternoon.
Oh, Thursday, okay.
I've just been invited because it was going to be with these other ministries. So I'm participating, and I will. I'll give Chris an update. I mean, it's a B to G meeting with those ministries, but what I can do is if there's anything really concerning coming out of it, that's what I'll pass. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I'll absolutely do that.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Councilor Roper, I think I missed looking at you to see if there was any comments from you.
No comments, just a genuine thank you for joining us today for these discussions. Thank you.
Very well. And at that, I will declare our meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.